Something else that I want to talk about that actually I don't want to talk about, but I think we should talk about, and I've kind of been intentionally avoiding it because it's such a disgusting topic, is just about these stories that are being circulated widely about Israeli soldiers raping Palestinian prisoners and the debate that's stirring in
Yeah.
Israeli society. This is such a horrific thing. I mean, there's even videos that are being circulated out. I can't really see where they're taking, all these prisoners lined up and they're huddling behind soldiers and clearly doing something to them. I'd rather not think
Yeah.
about what. But
Right.
can you tell us about the evidence of this rape and
Yeah.
the reception from the Israeli society?
Right. Well,
I'll just take it.
I mean, there's no question that this Palestinian prisoner was gang raped. I think using some sort of object, like a sharp object, by Israeli soldiers in that detention facility. Well, in that prison, it's kind of more of like a concentration camp, actually. There had already been a lot of stories leaked about it. There were whistleblowers, actually, within those prison camps, Israeli guards that leaked information about the kind of sexual abuse and torture that these prisoners were subjected to. Now, this was quite open. I mean, nobody's talking, denying that it happened. And like you said, they in fact did video, this horrible incident, and it's been shown many times on Israeli TV, not so that the Israelis can actually, not to the horror apparently of much of the public, though I'm sure to some of the public, but quite the reverse. They see this as justice, and what Ben Gvir and others have come out and said that well, it's not just a large portion of the Israeli leadership and the Israeli public supports support the act, and it's just the right of Israeli guards and soldiers to rape Palestinian, let's say, just Gentile prisoners in general. In fact, there was a poll taken very recently that found a plurality of Israelis support rape by Israeli soldiers of Palestinian prisoners. I think it was 47% to 43% and 10% undecided. Um, so a plurality of Israelis support this, and again, it's shown on TV and not as a way for the reason of condemning the behavior, but rather to celebrate it. So on the equivalent of America's Fox News has been shown many times, and you have politicians coming out and saying, "Yeah, this is what we got to do. We got to, in fact, we have to change the laws because their main concern is not that it's happening and these poor prisoners are being tortured in this way. Their concern is that maybe some of the perpetrators could actually get in trouble, and they want to change the law to make it to protect them. At this point, well, it seems like they never get in trouble, but they just want to make that ironclad. So there was that, the law proposed to, uh, um, yeah, again, to simply to make it clear that this is not an illegal act, within the state of Israel. Yeah, that's where we are.
So
I mean,
to
that's
you saying to make it into law to legalize
right,
the rape of prisoners,
right,
that this is not that we're not sugarcoating it. That's just what it is, right?
right.
I mean, how does the U.S. respond to this? How does the West respond to it? Do they just ignore it? I mean, how this is
Oh,
indefensible, right?
oh yeah,
There's clearly
absolutely, of
something
course.
wrong with this society if a
Right,
plurality think it's okay to that
right,
think it's the right thing to do. I think there was that incident where the settlers came down and busted into the prison
right,
to free the guards
right,
that were being detained for raping some prisoners so harshly that they had to be hospitalized. They were so upset that hey, you can't arrest them for raping. They came in and broke them out. And the wife of one of the prisoners that was being held, and I believe this man raped him not only with an object but with his penis himself.
mm,
The wife was saying that she's proud of her husband, that he has this right, that he's a hero. That's just so crazy.
Hmm.
It's unbelievable. I
Yeah,
heard this on the Gray Zone. If anybody wants to check it out and verify it themselves, but there is clearly something very wrong here in
right,
this
right.
society.
Yeah,
And how does the how what does the Western world do to
they look
cope with
the
this?
other
We know
way.
they're always giving them
Right,
Israel cover.
right. They look the other way. In
Can they
fact,
look
there was,
forever?
yeah. Well, there was, okay, I think at one of these Pentagon and press conferences, it may have been, if it wasn't Pentagon, it was State Department. A reporter did bring this incident up, and the response that he got from the spokesman, was, well, we trust Israel to investigate their own incidents. So that it was a non-answer. In other
Of
words,
course.
yes. So they're just looking the other way. I mean, this is not a secret. Everybody, I mean, again, this is the horror. These things went on in Israel, but generally the light wasn't shined on. This case, it's being celebrated. It's out in the open, right? You have um, these things would happen. Maybe some people would get in trouble, but then, after some sort of temporary detention, they would be let go, and then nobody would talk about it afterwards. Okay. But this time, of course, you had the settlers come down there and riot for their release, and then you had it actually shown on TV, and then you had politicians coming out and openly saying, "Yeah, this is right, and we need to legalize this just to make sure our heroes never get into trouble." Yeah, this is what Israeli society has become. I know we were talking about earlier there, Yitzhak Rabin. He was assassinated by, one of these extremist settlers. The extremist settlers well, they were extremists back then, but now they are the mainstream. Again, you see it's the plurality, right? It's something like 47% to 43% are actually in favor of this.
It's crazy. It's crazy because I don't think we've ever seen anything like this in history. We talk about the Holocaust and Nazi Germany, but the average German citizen was not aware of what was happening. It was a very select few, and it was more contained and concealed. But here we have the majority of Israeli society, a plurality supporting this. But you said there was 43% that are against it. I mean, that's not the bar is pretty low. Just
Yeah,
to say,
right.
just to say
Yeah.
that are
Well,
like
I don't
no.
think
So that
yeah.
that not giving them, they're not heroes.
Yeah,
But I'm saying is there
right.
becoming a rift in Israeli society? Are there some people that are like, whoa, this is getting a little bit too extreme? Is there a
Right.
chance that there's something internally that could push
Yeah.
back to kind of go
Well,
against this extremism,
okay.
or
I don't think so. Again, it's just like the dissident left, whatever you want to call it, is gone. There are individuals, but there's no political force. I mean, the truth is that it's almost just a difference of style between left and right. They all support the genocide. Nobody seems to be concerned about that. All of them support are fine with mistreatment of Palestinian prisoners. It seems like it's just you find on the left, it's just that maybe they're more concerned about how they look back home, so they want to, maybe not broadcast it on TV and maybe at least have some legal procedures that you go through instead of having, rioters come and release them. So, I mean, that's where the debate is, but it seems like on the substance of it, what is this moral or immoral? It's just more of a kind of procedural issues get debated and concern about,
I can't believe
our
they're
international image.
broadcasting.
Yeah, obviously they just don't care. They don't care what anybody thinks. That's what's happened over on, let's see, what you call the right wing part of the spectrum in Israel, and the left wing. I mean, they're more concerned about what the rest of the world thinks about them. Like you say, one of the reasons that the IDF detained these individuals, who had committed this barbaric act, is that they are concerned about like these ICJ rulings and ICC, decisions. Um, and they understand that if they don't maintain some sort of at least the appearance of judicial propriety, uh, um, that that they themselves, I mean, the IDF could actually be, warrants could be issued for the arrest of generals and so on and so forth. I think there's some awareness of that, so there's at least some effort to try to do things by the book and try to, at least show that you're making an effort to investigate your own crimes. That's one of the justifications for an international arrest warrant is that, okay, these people can't even, deal with, they're not bringing people to justice that clearly need to be brought to justice. This judicial system is broken down. So, we need to seize them in the international, in some other country and bring them to justice. But if the IDF can convince the outside world that, hey, we actually do have, these investigative committees and procedures and so on, we can take care of it. So don't worry. Yeah, we understand there are some problems or whatever, but we'll deal with it. I think that's the argument they like to put forward. But it's become increasingly difficult to do that because, the people on the right part of the spectrum aren't cooperating. They're just rioting and just, implementing mob justice.
It's crazy. I can't get over just the irony that the descendants of the Holocaust in World War II, they are essentially been acting their own Holocaust against the Palestinian people for 76 years since the creation of the state of Israel, starting with the Nakba, where they expelled almost 1 million Palestinians from their land, and then have been treating them like cattle and slowly taking their land and periodically having these massacres and eventually culminating into what we have today. It's just the irony of that is just so crazy that Israel's turning Jewish symbols into the modern day swastika. Like how it's awful, like if you're a Jewish person that's not a Zionist, you have to be you're destroying your religion, your people, your faith, turning them into monsters. And now you have to live with the fact that you're associated with this in some way because the U.S. and the Israeli state is trying to force Israel as Judaism and making forcing this unholy marriage of Zionism with the Jewish religion. And it's just awful. And I just can't believe that this is where we are after the Holocaust and everything and all this. And then you just look at what's happening and what the state of Israel is doing, what they are enacting a genocide, and it's the most public genocide ever. It's televised everywhere. Everybody sees it. It's open. We're debating the plurality of people think it's okay to rape prisoners. There was who was it? Smotrich was making the argument televised, in the Knesset, in the parliament, saying that it was moral to starve the 2 million Palestinians, just to let them starve until they release their hostages or whatever. Let them all starve to death. Starve to death, yes, to kill them all. Enacted. That's how more blatant, what more evidence do you need that this society is trying to commit a genocide, that is committing a genocide right now?
Right.
I just don't get it. It's just, we'll look back in history, and I think that's the hard part. It's so hard to believe that you're the bad guy, especially I think it's really hard for Christian Zionists because they're Christians. They believe they're doing the right thing, and they bought into the propaganda that we're supporting Israel, that they're the beacon of light, fighting the barbarism, without realizing that the state of Israel is the barbarism. This is the unholy monster that is inflicting all these atrocities on these people, on innocent peoples, Christians and Muslims. It's not. I just can't. I don't think they can cope with that. I don't think they'll be able to come with that realization. It's really hard to swallow that pill. And I think it's also very important that when you do meet people that are supportive of Israel or Christian Zionists, is to be sympathetic to them as well, to let them know that that you understand that how you can believe these things and that your heart's in the right place. I think a lot of people, when they do bad things, they're doing it because their heart's in the right place. And when people go after them too hard and say you're just evil, it puts them down. So you have to be able to give some room for them to come back to the others, to sort of come back to the truth, to realize what's happening, and to accept them with open arms and realize I understand, you're not a bad person for supporting this or believing this. The bad people were the people that that convinced you and poisoned your mind and did this. they're not bad in themselves, and I
Yeah, I
hope we
think
can
that's
bring
often
people
true.
back across the aisle because the divides right because it's just not something that I think people can stomach and swallow and believe. I mean, there's so many examples of this, throughout
Hmm.
history. I mean, even just like we talk about just COVID, people that were just so gung ho on forcing everybody to get their boosters and doubling masks, and then realize like, hey, we were kind of lied to. You can't continue to pillory these people and condemn them, and understand that, yeah, I could have been in your same shoes as well if I was in a different situation. I think that's very important to try to keep that openness and acceptance of people that they do make mistakes. And
Yeah,
I'm
right.
guilty of it too.
Yeah,
You are as
right.
well. We all are. We're human. You just have to
Hmm.
realize that you are somebody that evolves. Your ideas and your thoughts, they don't
Hmm.
necessarily just completely define you, just this one position that you have.
Yeah.
Part of being a
Well,
human
right.
being
Well,
is understanding
you have an
that
obligation to, to, let's say, perform reality checks, to occasionally stop and ask the hard
mm,
questions. It's hard for people to do, but I think you just have to do that. You stop and say, well, okay, maybe I went down or took a wrong turn here. I can remember this is a very minor example, but just like dealing with Ukraine, like prior to that summer offensive of 2022 or 2023 rather, the much ballyhooed summer offensive. You had such a there was such a contrast, I would go back and forth between the two, say, information spaces, and on the one side, the Western side, it was just all confidence. Yeah, the Russians are just going to crumble. This is it's just a question of like, do we make it? Um, how long will it take us to get to the Sea of Azov? Will it just be 2 weeks or will it be 2 months? That it was that kind of talk. And coming from Pentagon officials, it wasn't just a few bloggers or anything. This was official talk, from European leaders. And then on the Russian side, it actually turned out that they were, if anything, a little bit too self-critical. They said you say, well, they might be able to expect that they'll be able to break through one or two lines, and then, but even if they get like through a third line, it'll be a defeat for them, and they won't be able to hold on to the territory they take. And so this was just such a huge difference. And I say, okay, well, this is kind of a test. We'll see what happens, right? I think of every once in a while, you got to do that. And it turned out that, right, they never even got through the first line. So it just was clear that these people on the Western side of the information divide just did not know what they were talking about. But I try to do that every once in a while, just
mm,
step back and look. I know this is not it's easier to do that than to, let's say, if you are a Jewish person and you identify with your tribe, it's really hard. Okay, because the people and you love, your extended family, they're all part of it. And maybe, if you're in Israel, you have relatives that are in the IDF, and it's hard to actually come to terms with what might be happening. Very hard. We have to be honest about what they're
yeah,
doing,
yeah,
but then at the
no,
same time be sympathetic with those individuals. And there are brave and extraordinary individuals, that do that and are doing that in Israel, but they're few and far between. It's a very difficult. Um, I agree with you on some level.
mm,
I'm sympathetic, okay, with them, but at the same time, like you just see. The behavior. I mean, it is bestial. It is depraved. I mean, that's we're talking about the rape of prisoners. That's there. There is no.
right.
Sorry, you have you know you, you have descended into depravity. I'm sorry that happened, and I believe there's some goodness in you there, but you have become depraved if you celebrate something like that.
Right. Yeah, no, my comments were more directed to Jews
Okay,
and
people,
Christian
right,
Zionists
in the
living
U.S.,
here
right,
in
right,
America.
right,
People
right, right,
people watching Fox News that are just getting the Hamas October 7th narrative again and again and again. And they're not seeing the truth. But once the truth
right,
does get exposed, it can be a very difficult pill to swallow. But
right.
do realize that if you do acknowledge that you were wrong or you were lied to, and that you can see what's happening, and you don't and you condemn the genocide, condemn the actions that the state of Israel is taking, you will be met with an outpouring of support and love from the other side. That says, no one's we're not
Yeah.
going to hate you for it. No
Right.
one's
Yeah. Well,
people make
unfortunately, a lot of
mistakes.
people.
People get
Right.
lied to constantly. People get
Yeah.
conned.
Right. Sure. Sure.
It's just what
Right.
happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, they are going to get a lot of hate from the other side. Um, again, a good friend of mine, his girlfriend, I guess, grew up with a lot of Jewish friends, and she's really very just like us. She's very much aware of what's going on in Palestine, and she is not afraid to post, things on her social media accounts. And yeah, some of her Jewish friends are say, "Yeah, you're right. We agree with you. We hate what's going on." But a lot of, including like I think her very best friend, just will not talk to her. He's really it's ended friendships, and that happens too. So it is hard for people to make
Yeah,
those,
that
even when they're
happens
outside
when.
of Israel. Like you're saying, um, these it's a very emotional issue.
Mhm. Right. Yeah. Oh, it's just terrifying. It's the whole story of Israel is such a crazy story. The
Yeah.
like history is just what a
Well, I would
interesting
say, one thing I just wanted to say
part
is
of
just that,
history.
yeah.
Terrifying but interesting.
Well, I think part of the problem
Huh.
is that it shows a misuse of history, and a wrong lessons drawn from history. It seems like the lesson that we learned is that, well, the Jews are always the victims. They're the eternal victims. And in fact, you even hear people say that, like they're the canaries in the coal mine or whatever. That's what the Jews are. They're the eternal victims. And
That's what
it's
Netanyahu
a
always says.
yeah, it's a ahistorical way of looking at things. Like the Jews are just always this. Like this is sort of, without they don't live in history. Somehow they live above history. But but so it's just like we have our our historical understanding is frozen back in like 1945, and and um, and so many people just can't actually leave that. You have to say that a lot has transpired since that. Things have changed. Nations have risen and fallen. The Soviet Union has fallen, right? And people change, institutions change. They were something at one time. That institution in 1945, those people in 1945 are not the people that are here now. These are different people. They've grown up under different conditions, and you have to judge them according to the current reality. You can't simply always, you know, repeat the fact, well, that's the thing with anti-Semitism, right? That's the only concern. We're always in, actually we're back in the bad old days of the Nazis and the persecuted Jews. It's just like that never ended. It did end, and we are living in a different time in a different reality. And you simply have to say, okay, go back and learn the lessons. But the lesson is not that Jews are the eternal victims. That doesn't make any sense. That's again an ahistorical understanding. You've frozen them in time now, and it prevents you from looking at the current reality. You say the current reality is right above in front of you, but instead of looking at it, you kind of just take a poster of 1945 and put it in front of your face, and that's where you always are. And that's what allowed so much of this to happen. It's just like whenever criticisms, of course, come against are made of Israel, it's just, well, we always uh, start talking about the Nazis and the specter of anti-Semitism and so on. We always take us back, back to the 1930s, and
Right. Yeah. No. It's amazing how the Hitler and the Nazis is invoked constantly,
uh,
constantly, just
right,
everything. Winston Churchill, Neville Chamberlain, and Hitler rising again, Third Reich. Just look, I understand. We know that history. We know it, and we know it's terrible. But like you're saying, we live in a different reality. The Nazi regime doesn't exist. But
right.
what we do have is a genocide that's being
Hmm.
perpetrated by the descendants of the Holocaust, which is just so ironic. I just still can't believe it. It's just, I don't know. Maybe we should end it there.
Okay,
I
yeah,
don't. I
yeah,
don't know if we were over an hour, and I
okay,
don't want to
sure,
get too emotional. So,
right, right.
okay, all right, Dad.
Okay,
Okay, well, have a good weekend.
all right,
All right, bye bye.
bye.